Hey, lead learners, welcome to the Learning Lab, the podcast dedicated to empowering educational leaders like you to lead with capacity, competency, and confidence. I'm Dr. Lisa Weir, aka Lead Learner Lisa, and I am your host. And in each episode, we'll explore the latest trends, insights, and strategies to help you navigate the ever-evolving landscape of education. Whether you're a seasoned administrator, an aspiring principal, or a teacher leader, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and practical advice. We believe that strong leadership is the cornerstone of successful schools and thriving students, and we are here to support you on your journey. Join us as we dive into conversations with visionary educators, share real-world success stories, and provide actionable tips to enhance your leadership skills. Together, we'll build a community of lead learners committed to making a lasting impact in education, changing lives, and making futures one mind at a time. So let's get started and lead the way to a brighter future for our students and our schools. Hey, lead learners, I'm Dr. Lisa, and I'm so excited to have Dr. Sid Faucette join me in the Learning Lab today. Dr. Faucette has an extensive background in organizational and educational leadership. As an educational leader, Dr. Faucette has been a teacher, a principal, a superintendent of traditional public schools across the country. Additionally, Dr. Faucette is one of the first on the scene relative to charter school management in the state of Michigan as the founder of a large educational service provider serving several charter districts throughout the state. Currently, Dr. Faucette is working on planning a multiracial church in the area where Nat Turner insurrection occurred, Southampton, Virginia. Dr. Faucette, or Sid, as I lovingly like to refer to you as, welcome and thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab.
Well, it's great to be here with you, and I'm gonna learn from you as I usually do. So
I don't know about that.
I'm ready.
So I am really excited to have you here in the lab to really talk about your why relative to leadership and education. Said in the past, you've really shared your passion and a heartfelt story with me as a mentor for many years of mine. And I think that there's really a lot that our listeners could glean from your story. And I also just welcome you to just share your why and other experiences with our listeners. So why don't you share your why? And I love this story, so I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Well, first, let me get started and say that I promised myself as a child I would never get into education, and I only spent 50 years there. So I just started, since you said I was in education, I'll get to my why. It comes somewhat out of the story I'm going to tell. And it's really, this isn't a story. This is as true as we're here today. When I was, I call it a little boy, of course, I've never been little, but when I was a child, 8, 9 years old, maybe, it could even been earlier than that, I lived right across the street from the playground of the elementary school. You could see the school diagonally to my left. But I used to stand at the window and I would watch this, I'll call it a young woman, who was an African American woman would be coming by the street. She lived beside the elementary school, but walked up beside it, walked in front of my elementary school, let me add, is a white elementary school, walked in front of my house and walked about another mile out into the country to her, what was in those days called the colored schools. And
Mhm.
that's historically what they were called. But I used to ask my mother, her mama's name was Anna Boone, and
I remember Anna Boone. Oh,
Anna Boone's daughter. And I was asked my mother, and I praise God for my mother never ever saying anything that in any way would lead to prejudice or anything racial. I'll just be frank about it. But I used to ask my mother daily. Well, probably might have missed a day every now and then, but I would say, Mama, why is Anna Boone's daughter walking by my school to get to her school? And back back as a child, 8, 9 years old, I realized, and I said it verbally, and I said it out in public, and I talked with my mother about it. There was just nothing right. But Anna Moon's daughter walking by a building that was brick and athletic fields and had the things that we expected in those days. Today it would be obsolete for the modern child, but in those days, and walked down to an old wooden building, hadn't been painted for years, might have a little bit for a playground, but didn't have any of those attractive things that we had in ball fields and all. It started me on a journey, I might say. And I might, and this wasn't a part of your question, but I'll add it to it because I've had this conversation several times, at least since I've been back here. Oh, and by the way, I came from Southampton County, Virginia, where the Nat Turner insurrection occurred, from a little town called Boykins, which is south of where I live now. But it's just that I never understood, for example, why the black kids went to the other high school and I didn't. And it was just a matter as a child of just seeing that it was wrong. And in my career in education, the one I planned myself I'd never be in, when I started teaching, my first job was in the first year of full integration in
Okay.
Madison in Virginia. And my second job was elementary school back home that was the first year of integration. And my third job was the first year of integration. And so it wasn't a pioneer by intent, it was just pioneer by happenstance. And the thing that, Lisa, I think that is still true today is one thing that I learned once I got going in my career, going back to watching Anna Boone's daughter walk by the front of my house every day from my childhood, was that what I could learn by listening, by observing and by listening, that I could learn so much more. As you've heard me say before so crudely, if I just shut up and listen. And now I add to it, if we shut up and listen, then we hear. A lot of people listen so they can have some response.
Right.
But the story of Anna Boone's daughter is just so similar to who I am and what my life's been about. And I use in Michigan what my background was there, my career working with charter schools, with education service provider. And I never talked a lot about it. You and I have talked a little about it. But I was always looking for the schools everybody else had given up on. My career wasn't about trying to go to the fancy places. And when I was in the fancy places, I probably was considered a troublemaker because I was talking about Animal's daughter. I was talking about how we come together into unity. And I'm going to add this because this is something I'm talking about making an old man cry. But I remember when God told me to come plant this church, and I hadn't hung up the phone. I said, I got to let the kids know. So Sarah was just up the street from me. So I called her first and I said, you're not going to believe what's happened. This, oh boy, this story. And she said, this is verbatim. She said, Dad, look, God's been preparing you for this your whole life. And tears streamed. But I said, nope, I'm not giving her a chance to call my other daughter, Allison, who lives in. So I immediately dialed up Allison. Do you know what words came out of her mouth? The identical words. And I guess God has.
Right.
It goes back literally to where we started today with Annaboo's daughter.
Your journey really seemed to
The first,
start with looking out the window. And you said something about listening. I think you've been listening to that Sid voice that witnessed Anna Boone's daughter walking past your window, right past the school, to just go a mile away to something that really wasn't as nice or didn't have the things that were just right there in her own backyard, that listening to that voice. And so I agree with Sarah and Allison in that he's been preparing you for this, and it's just all been part of your journey. Absolutely.
it's just, I have realized it since I've been back here. God told me to come back in 2020 and 2021. I moved back and being back here, and I hate using the term real culturated, but getting real culturated to what I promised myself that I'd never come back to.
Right.
And it's been interesting to get real culturated and realize that maybe God was preparing me. Maybe God was. I don't like to admit it. If you were with me, and I'd love for you to have you with me, quite frankly, with what I'm doing, to be a part of it, you'd be amazed at the conversations that I do have, and that in most cases people are polite. But I'll tell you, and this was from a friend who now has passed away, but she was a young woman, a young African American woman. I never forget the day. We were really good friends. Her dad was a pastor. He and I had become just unbelievably good friends. I'll never forget the day that she said, and I think this is true nationally now, and that's the reason I'm not saying this to go local on you. But she looked up at me and she said, Sid, I think we're more divided today than we used to be.
Mhm.
What's going on at the national level in our country is walls are being built. And I hate saying it, Lisa, those of us in leadership have got to have the guts. Let Anna Boone's daughter stop at the school close to her house.
You have to speak. I remember it said, I almost think it was exactly 10 years ago because it would have been in July of 2015. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is the July or August. I wouldn't be surprised if this was around the same time or date when I first heard that story. And when you first told that story, there were tears in your eye. And then I don't think there was a dry eye in that conference room. But I think sharing that story also, even though it really shaped your why, it helped to keep in the center of our space that we were working within and the things that we were working on just the bigger picture and to not, because sometimes I think to your point you just made that we get so far away from people start thinking about the 60s or the 50s and different time where civil rights, all of that. And we get so far away from that that people forget that a lot of that still exists. And to your point, it seems like we've just picked those bricks up that from the walls that we broke before, and we're just rebuilding the wall all over again. And I loved that you would and I think that's an important leadership trait to continue to lift those things up to help people remember why what we're doing and what the bigger picture is. Then, because we can get caught up in the task of day to day and maybe a conversation you had with a coworker or something that didn't go right, a board meeting that didn't go right, and forget really the big picture. And it seems like through your journey, you still have that vision and you keep that at the center of your heart, looking out the window. Why is she walking away, walking a mile to another school? And so much so that on a daily basis, you're asking your mom, help me understand this. It makes no sense.
But Lisa, I think take Anna Boone's daughter and watching her. And most people don't believe me when I say this, but I grew up poor. I didn't grow up with fancy clothes and cars and house and all that stuff. I wasn't in poverty. I want to make absolutely, you've heard me say that before. I
Mhm.
was, we did have food. We did have something to wear, so don't get me wrong. But I just, and I felt it as a child, is just that from within, we do have a purpose. And I think that while I didn't think mine was in education, but I'll tell you this, I just told this to someone just the other day. They were talking about schools and the schools here, my Lord. Anything you can think of as bad is better than. It's unbelievable to watch. But I remember, and I won't put the name on the community I was in, but it's in one of the communities in Michigan that people like to play doesn't exist. Fell into Lake Michigan somewhere at all. But I remember when we were able to get 85% of the kids,
Yes.
and I'm going to tell you, I thought what came at me was harsher than what comes at me back here because that school with 99% black children in true poverty couldn't do that,
Mhm.
but we did.
Right.
And the thing, and I don't know if you remember this because I know that things have changed since I ran off into the crazy land here. Uh, but my whole career was about, and I won't give the long version, it was about empowering children to achieve or to at least have the opportunity at their American dream.
You're right.
And because I think that every one of us, I'll even say you included, I never asked you your dream, I don't think, but we talked a lot about your purpose. But I'm just saying, I think every one of us somewhere in us has a dream. And and my dream, quite frankly, was not to live poor.
Mhm. I like what you said, and it really connects to what you said about the purpose. I 100% agree. And that we have our purpose. And sometimes we don't always see it as, for example, you didn't see being education, but your journey, God takes you through that journey and he gets you back on that, in that direction of your purpose. And the American dream. I love what you used to say about the American dream. What the American dream means to me and for me may be different than the person next to me, but it's about that opportunity to be able to have that dream and live that dream out. And I feel like it's deeply connected to the purpose. Sid, I think about today, we hear a lot of topics and conversation about equity in education, equity in opportunities. We think equity in resources. We think about Anna Boone's
Yeah.
daughter, and maybe she didn't have the same resources that you had at the school that you had. Equity is a word that a lot of leadership frameworks use, and as one of your responsibilities, core principles is to ensure equity in education. What would you say to leaders today, and even thinking about the climate that we live in, where we talked about those bricks, that wall being rebuilt? What would you say to a leader trying to really navigate and ensure that equity for Anna Boone's daughters and sons that are out there today?
You shouldn't have asked me that question.
No, I want to hear that.
You shouldn't have asked me that question. But now I'm going to give you a different answer than textbook, different answer than what's out there in our today, because I have a different answer and I believe a different answer.
All right.
You've heard most all of this, or if not
I
all of
love the citizen, so bring them. I got a
it.
notepad here to write down.
I'm not going to try to do too many of those on you today. But see, I learned this from children. I didn't learn this in graduate school or anywhere else. But I learned that every single child that walks in the schoolhouse door, certainly one that I was associated with,
Mhm.
was gifted and or talented.
Amen.
I don't care how autistic you are,
Understand.
but
Hmm.
the point I'm making is every single child, God put a gift in them. All right, now, this is where I'm really different. And now I'm going to tell you, there are very few educators who agree with what I just said. I get that conversation with people, and I'm going to tell you, they glaze over. But I know that if you approach every child as gifted and talented, you educate them a different way. So to me, equity is where I reallocate resources
Yes.
to teach each child, or to, I should say, serve each child by his or her gift. Because let's say, for example, if I have a special ed child that's truly gifted, I'm going to provide special ed services. But you provide them different if the child's gifted. I'll never forget in Michigan, we had a charter school that became an autistic regional school because the school district sent the kids to them. And by the way, the authorizer shut it down because they didn't want us to be an autistic school.
Mhm.
But let me tell you something, I've never been around so many gifted children. But I'll add, just so for your hearers, that had deviant behavior by what the standard norms are in a school. But those kids were so gifted, it was scary to watch a whole building full of gifted children running around, and you didn't have a clue what they were going to do next.
I know. I think.
I'm just saying, to me, equity is that, in a way, I'll even say it a slightly different way, is as educators, as professionals, we reallocate our interests, we allocate our service, and we happen then to bring the money to the service that the child needs to pursue and to fulfill. You notice my word, fulfill his or her giftedness. And I'm going to give you, I'm saying I changed the subject, but I'm not. As superintendent of Virginia Beach, I use that one, right? As
Yes, sir.
superintendent of Virginia
Yes, sir.
Beach, no, we were asked to write two of the standard of learnings here. And Michigan standard of quality is standard of learning. And my school district was asked to write two of them out of four. And I'll never forget my superintendent for instruction, Dr. Brown, came down one day and he said, Sid, what do you really think of this? And this is what he and I concluded, okay, is we need accountability, okay, for the curriculum, what to be done. But we both agreed that what was going to happen is we were going to make the floor the ceiling.
Mm,
And what's happened is because people teach so much to the test, and the test is written so the lowest level child can pass it.
right.
I
Yeah.
think we've done under equity, I think in the so-called, the way it's allocated and even been you've held accounted for, has actually held children back from pursuing their gifts and talents. Unless now you have some wacko like me who doesn't really care and say, okay, reprimand. Because I didn't mind being reprimanded.
Not do the right thing.
You do the right thing just because it's the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of different things to me when you were talking about that, think about equity and, all those pictures that, what equity means. It is about allocating the resources and support to the individual students to help them to be successful in
Yeah.
realizing their talents and so forth. And it really takes me back to my special education days,
Yeah.
30 or more decades, where you
Oh, yeah.
had individual education plans. And, I believe in regular education. I believe in individual student learning plans that really address what their gifts, their strengths, and opportunities for growth. And to me, that's equity when you give me what I need to be successful in building out on the talents that are with me. And that we talked about in our purpose, right? Each one of those individual students, Anna had her purpose in life, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we need to help. That education is the foundation to help the student along their journey as they go to fulfill their
Yeah.
accountability piece, of course.
But and I won't say this is equity, although it could be distilled into equity, is I think that we have to learn to do a better job at helping children identify their purpose. Quite frankly, is to see that what school is about opportunity,
Yeah, yeah.
even about abundance. It's not about what so much of what I see at school. We teach kids almost a limited mindset rather than teaching kids a mindset of, I can be whatever I want to be, and I'll go show them I can be.
I love that. I think I'm going to write that down. That's going to be one of my new citizens is a mindset of abundance because we about growth mindset and learning, but I really think it's key when you use that word abundance. It just means that more than you ever thought that you could achieve in limits around that. It really reminds me of my Christian walk when we think about that God is what we're expecting for God, we're going to receive over and above in abundance than
Absolutely.
anything we could ever imagine. And I think that we want our students to that way, but I also think that as adults and educators, as we are looking at the individual students that come through our school, we need to see them within the context of abundance. We need to limit what they can do or what they might be, because again, going back to what you said earlier, we're all given purpose, and with our God-given purpose, it's what they can be and become is more than what we could ever imagine. And I think when we have that type of mindset in schools as leaders or as educators, then we set the bar really high. We're just not teaching the test, and we're really allowing the students to become all that they can, and making sure, again, going back to what you said in equity, making sure that each individual student has what they need to be able to make that their reality.
And they can, Lisa. That's the point. They can. But I'm going to tell you, as educators, no matter what a child comes from, no matter how a child behaves, we've got to know that child has promise in himself or herself. And still installed, I'll even say, I won't say instilled, but in that child. Now, maybe as a plumber, it may not be as a doctoral candidate at Harvard or an attorney or whatever, but everyone has installed in him or her. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what you said about purpose piece. And I for our listeners, I'm wondering and thinking about our leaders, if you think back over the years, and about Anna Boone and think about this sort of educating in abundance and um, the climate of education,
Yeah.
do you share with leaders or aspiring leaders to help them navigate the current state of education so that they can educate in abundance?
All right. Now
I like
I'm
that.
gonna
That's
do.
my new saying, educate within
All
the
right.
context of abundance.
Okay. Well, now what I'm gonna do, you've seen before, and it was always raggedy looking, but I asked you all to do it in much classier style than I did it. So I did it one day just sitting around. I want you to get a piece of paper. I want you to draw an arrow going north and south, and a midpoint arrow going east and west. And I want you to draw northeast and northwest. And I want you to write down in the Northeast and Northwest piece what you truly believe in, what your non-negotiables are for who you are as a professional and as a human being. And every time, and I want you to look at that sheet so often that it gets so embedded in your head that you have, I'm going to use guts here, and I should use, I'm sure there's some other prettier word, but you know me, that one of us as educators, people empowered, entrusted with children, have the guts to go do the right thing by every child. To what you call it equity, Lisa, to ensure that every single child, because of me, that I come in contact with, if I'm the principal of the school, or I'm the superintendent of schools, or I'm the teacher in the classroom, that I do everything I can to make sure that every single child, and as the principal of the superintendent, every single teacher
Mm, yeah,
has that he or she needs to go get the job done, to empower every child with attitudes and values, as well as the knowledge, skills, understanding, all that, to go pursue their American dream.
absolutely. That and that's kind of your compass and your guide. And I love the advice that you're giving to look at it every day because it's really easy for us to get off course. And if you have that compass that you created with your true north in front of you, you'll be able to educate in abundance. And that's abundance for each child, and it looks different for each child. And recognizing that it does look different, so it's our responsibility to make sure that each child gets the individual. And to your point, each educator, teacher gets the supports and things that they need to make that possible, to make that American
I'm going to say something very unpopular, okay? You've heard this before, but I say that publicly. I guess I'm far enough away from where your podcast is going, I might be safe. But in 1994, before 12,000 people sitting in a convention center in Virginia Beach, Virginia, God knows what I see today. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to get judgmental, so don't worry about me.
people.
But I said then that what I see happening in education that's going to change education radically is that teachers are starting to not try to be role models for children. And I think that every one of us who works with a child, from the teacher in particular, but to the principal, to the custodian, to the cafeteria worker, that we should behave ourselves and we should have the work ethic, if nothing else, that they could want to be like me. Because you know, there are little eyes upon you and they're watching every day. And that's how children are. And every single child that goes to school has a hero, a role model at that school.
Yeah, yeah. And
And we need to realize the responsibility we have, even if it's just to that one child, to be that person that's worthy of somebody being like.
and they're watching us and a lot of time with us in the school, and it's real easy for us to get caught up in what's going on with us. And you really bring me to a point as we go into the close, but I do want to touch on this since you brought that up, because it is really important that we remember that. And it's up to the leaders to really facilitate and create that culture where there is that positive role modeling, and the students can look up to. But when I think about it, and then I think about it relative to the teacher shortage, I recently read an article from Edweek, and it was called "What Teachers Think They Should Actually Make versus What They're Actually Paid." And the article highlighted that if teachers were paid what they think they should be paid, there would be a 25% increase. I think the median was 60,000 something, and it would increase it to about 85,000. And I remember one of the lessons as a mentor that you taught me was to never lose a great team member due to money. Like,
But the deal.
yeah, yeah, let's make a deal, figure it out. But also to your point about being a role model, what that you have or ideas or tips for a leader? Because it's about the money piece is important. It's a motivation. How does a leader intrinsically motivate their staff to be that role model that you're talking about?
Well, first, since I'm the school level leader now with the principal, okay, uh, is I used a lot, particularly back in the early days, as great schools have great principals,
Mhm.
period.
Absolutely.
Now, Now, what I do believe when I say this, and I'm not trying to get churchy on anybody, and I did this a lot and never told anybody what it was. I wasn't trying to be tricky, but if you sit and make a list of Judeo-Christian values, you'll do pretty good being a role model.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to get a little biblical, go do the fruit of the Spirit and take the 9 characteristics that are the job description for Jesus. And they work pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But if we would simply make that list of Judeo-Christian values, as I joke and say, you can go ask Dr. Google what they are, and he'll give them to you. But I'm just saying to you, and to live in the world that we grew up in, to just a list of traditional values. If that and you live that, and I'm one that I say the wrong way, but I was taught this by a group of kids who came up with this in a little workshop we did with them when I was a high school principal. And I think that society has lost this one and doesn't want it back, but they really miss it. How's that?
I like that. Yeah.
Consistency breeds
Mm-hmm.
how unreasonable you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
People come to me for counseling if something happened in their jobs. It
Mm-hmm.
was always a result of inconsistency. And I say, well, what if? And I mean, I'm the harshest punishment. And they will say, this is where it came from high school seniors in the backwoods of Virginia. Fair. Now, that's a total exaggeration of life. But the
Right.
point is, that
Consistency.
people want, but say if you live, I'm going to go back to where I started, doing a circle on you. If you go back to your Judeo-Christian values, or let's make it prettier, you stick to your true north, and you're consistent in how you carry it out, you're going to be a leader. Well, guess what? But you've heard this one before. And you can answer if you want to. Do you know what you got to have to be the leader?
What's that?
Followers.
Yes. I tell everybody this story all the time. One of my mentors used to say, walking out the door, Lisa, if no one's following you, you are not leading.
That's right, you're right. But see, so many people call themselves leaders, and at best, they're the manager or
Mm.
an administrator. And the leader, I'll say it a polite way. Being a leader is risky business because you stand for something consistently. I mean, I really say, and I don't want overtime on you here, so I'm gonna shut up. But no, but one of the things I was proudest of as a principal was when kids walked in the office, handed me a discipline form, they could tell me what the discipline was because of consistency. And
Yeah.
guess what? They were fine with it because,
They knew what to expect. And you were consistent. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm saying, I just think that we've got to get to a set of, I'll call it nicer way, core values, and we need to live them. And quite frankly, I think everybody expects them, no matter how they live their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Key things there it is. There's a difference between a manager and a leader. Number one, absolutely. If you're leading and no one's following you, you're not leading. And you also talked about the core values. And one of my favorite books, and I oftentimes, it's one of the first books when I'm mentoring someone or suggested them, is I believe that Kenneth Blanchard is, I might have the author's name wrong, but it's called Lead Like Jesus. And it
Yeah.
goes to exactly what you said. And it's a lot about servant leadership. Um,
Jesus, before he went to the cross, got on his hands and knees and even washed the feet of a stinky old fisherman named Peter.
mhm.
I was going to wash that stinky old fisherman's feet and tell him, I'm giving you eternal life and I'm going to build my church on you as a rock.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How about that child that represents that stinky old fisherman?
Yep. And they come through our door and they purpose. We talked about that earlier and we're part of that journey. And as leaders, I think we're really responsible to make sure that they have success on that journey. So thank you so much. That was a lot of great wisdom. Have to have you back on the show for sure, because I think we could go on for a lot longer. Lead learners, time for us to hang up our lab coats until next time. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Instagram, One Mind Ed Consulting LLC. Please like and share. Dr. Faucette said, thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab. I definitely hope that you'll come back soon. There's so much I think that, and as a mentor for me, I know you really pour into me, and I know there's a lot of leaders and aspiring leaders out there that can learn a lot. I do have a question before you leave. I have my motivational Mondays. I do a successful tip. I come up with a word of the week and give leaders some tips. So you'll have to check that out on Instagram. And it's called Successful. My granddaughter helped me come up with that name, but it's as I'm sipping my cup of coffee and just sharing a cup with listeners. So before you leave, my question is, what is your preferred drink to start off the day?
Oh, it's a whole cup of coffee with some almond creamer in it. It's got a French in it,
There
Faucette.
you go. So I hope that you will get your cup of coffee with almond milk in it. Said, and join me with my other sipsters as I grab my cup of coffee, which is usually just plain black coffee, for another weekly successful tip for weekly inspirational and practical tips relative to leadership, one word, one cup, and one sip at a time. Until next time, lead learners, it's time again to hang up our lab coats. I encourage you to continue to lead, learn, and love, changing lives and making futures one mind at a time.